just a bit of British reserve for the presidential hopeful as he arrived in Downing Street. There was no Prime Minister to greet him outside. Number 10 has been cautious to give Barack Obama the same type of reception that his Republican rival John McCain got when he was here earlier in the year. The talks with Gordon Brown in Downing Street lasted about 2 hours and covered a wide range of issues: the Middle East, climate change and the world economy. Afterwards, Senator Obama said it had been a wonderful visit. He stressed that Britain and America should continue to work together to tackle global problems.
The Prime Minister's emphasis, like mine, is on how we can strengthen the transatlantic relationship to solve problems that can't be solved by any single country individually. Climate change, the issue of international terrorism, some of the issues surrounding financial markets.
Barack Obama also paid tribute to British forces serving in Iraq and Afghanistan.
The troops here in Great Britain have borne a heavy price for wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and I think the American people are grateful for all the help that has been provided.
Earlier, Senator Obama had discussions with the former Prime Minister Tony Blair, now a Middle East envoy. Mr. Obama also met the Conservative leader David Cameron. Speaking before he left Downing Street, Barack Obama said he had no advice to give on the Prime Minister's political problems, but added, "You're always more popular before you're actually in charge." Mark Sanders, BBC News.
Well, our diplomatic correspondent Bridget Kendall is in Downing Street now. Bridget, anything of substance in this Obama meeting with the media, or was it just a photo op?
I think it was largely a photo opportunity. We didn't really hear about what he talked about with Gordon Brown, and we just picked up hints about what he felt about the visit. Certainly the mood music as far as Downing Street officials are that this was a very warm meeting and they had a good talk and they got through a lot of very important subjects. But I think this was all about finishing up this tour that's been going on for more than a week. He's been in Paris, he's been in Berlin, he's been in the Middle East, and now he's ended up in London and on the steps of number 10 Downing Street. But he was quite almost hesitant as he answered some of the questions, quite thoughtful, I think, very aware that there is a question mark about how does this play back home. On the surface, it appears that it answers those of his critics in the Republican Party, his rival John McCain, who say, "Where's your foreign policy experience? I've met all these people. What have you done?" And here he's been on the campaign trail outside the country. He's certainly met people. But that also invites criticism. What's he doing using foreign policy as a means to conduct what should be a domestic campaign at home?
He did, it struck me, he did say one thing about Afghanistan, and that is he expected other nations to start playing a bigger role. Was that a sort of vague dig at the Italians and at the Germans who go there but don't fight?
I don't think it was aimed at Britain. I mean, he talked about Britain's stalwart assistance in Afghanistan and made a point of thanking the British troops for their sacrifices and burden. But this is a theme. It was in his Berlin speech a couple of days ago. It emerged in his press conference, standing side by side with the French president in Paris yesterday. But that is clearly a message he's been taking to those countries. The French have agreed to some more troops. The Americans, the British, NATO in general are very worried about the fact that the task of tackling the Taliban, the threat of al-Qaeda insurgents in Afghanistan seems almost insurmountable, and that they need more troops, and where are they going to get them from, and they need more flexibility. And this was echoed in his speech. That's current American policy. That's not different from what you hear from the American administration. It was certainly a theme.
I might have missed the words, but did he mention anything about the special relationship?
Well, it's a good question to ask, Peter, because he himself did not use those words. When he talked about Gordon Brown and Britain, he talked about the importance of the transatlantic relationship, which is, of course, a word which embraces not just Britain, but the rest of Europe, and makes one remember that he chose to give his speech aimed at the whole of Europe from Berlin, not from London. He was asked a question about the special relationship, did it still matter? And he started talking about America's historic ties with Britain, the fact that an awful lot of people could trace their ancestry back to England, as he put it, and the cultural ties between the two countries, the fact that we just like Britain, he said. But that didn't sound to me like a man who was focusing on Britain as a special relationship when it comes to policy. And it will be interesting to see, if he were to win the American elections and became president, whether his focus would still rest on an axis that was Washington-London, phone calls back and forth between the White House and Number 10, or whether he'd be talking just as much to the French president and the German chancellor.
Bridget Kendall in Downing Street, thank you. Well, Candace Allen is with the Democrats Abroad campaign group. She's with me now. How did you rate, at the end of this tour by Barack Obama, the impact it's had?
Well, I was lucky enough to be in Berlin, and of course that was quite extraordinary. 215,000 people listening attentively, and I think quite thoughtfully. There wasn't a major jubilation in terms of, and I think the senator really was very careful in his tone. I've heard him speak several times live in the United States, and he can really make people very emotional if he cares to. But it was very important to him, first of all, to take an even tone. Because he comes as a senator more than a candidate, although we cannot be disingenuous about this.
Well, one of our albeit extremely right-wing
Yes.
commentators, Simon Heffer, in the Daily Telegraph today, says, I have been impressed by the rhetorical skills of Barack Obama, only slightly less than I've been impressed by his ability to talk complete flannel in his handsomely crafted speeches. What was the substance of the Berlin speech?
I think it was it's extremely important to Barack Obama that the world understand and Americans understand that we are one in facing the global challenges of this time, and so he was spending a lot of time on the Berlin airlift and saying that we have a history of this. We have not always lived up to the absolute ideals of the American project. But at this time, we do want, it is absolutely necessary that we come together and do this. And I don't know, it's easy for somebody to say quite flippantly that this is flannel, but it is an extremely important message to both the American people and to the international audience that there has been an approach to global cooperation which has not been terribly cooperative, and it's time for a change.
Candace Allen, thank you very much for joining us.